Hey there, Shams here. So ever since I made my Dominion Fang Berserker technique guide, a lot of people have been asking me engraving related questions on that video. So with this video I'm hoping to answer a lot of those questions that are related to engravings. A lot of questions are, why am I running Spirit Absorption, and what are some alternatives to what I'm running. So without further ado, I will go into talking about some of those questions, hoping to answer them, and this video will be time-stamped, so you can just skip to anything you like. So the most frequent question that I'm getting is, why Spirit Absorption? Why not run a damage engraving here? So as explained in the guide video, we're running Spirit Absorption to get maximum attack speed and movement speed while inside burst mode. This makes your animations the fastest they can possibly be, while also making Raid Captain give you max damage. Raid Captain will be easier to max out, with group members like supports and maybe a sharpshooter, I don't know, anything that gives group-wide movement speed. But another reason is because the Minion Fang essentially has an engraving in itself in the last row. When it says damage to foes 15%, this is actually more damage than you see skill damage, because skill damage is additive, damage to foes is multiplicative. Additive damage is what you have on your tripods, while multiplicative is what you have on your engraving. So essentially this 6-piece is what you're missing here. This pays up for you missing a damage engraving here. So you also notice that we get an additional 30. This is 30 cooldown. This is not in addition to the previous set bonuses. The set bonus just upgrades and it's just what you have. So 30% cooldown with the little bit of swiftness that you have, and gems puts you to around 40 something to above 50 a bit. This means that you are essentially becoming a little bit of a spammy class. You don't exactly play as Berserker's technique would usually play, and Berserker's technique is usually a very slow build. Animations take way too long and stuff like that, but this is such a different build to that you can afford not running an entire damage engraving, because you have so little cooldown. You want to use all your abilities as fast as possible, so they go on cooldown and they come back faster again. So less time spending in Hellblade, less time spending in Strike Wave animation, all of that is so good. That is why Spirit Absorption. Now I'm gonna segue into a little bit of talking what you can replace here. So without further ado, let's do that. So before I actually talk about what are some replacements for these engravings that you see on the screen, I want to emphasize that this is an insane overkill. You do not need 5 engravings for the current content. I know that every person that is watching Lost Ark engraving related videos is gunning for 5 engravings and nothing less, accepting nothing less, but I would like to emphasize that you really don't need 5 engravings to beat the current content. You barely need 4. 3 plus 1 works just perfectly fine. Maybe you won't be accepted into groups, but if you have a static that is really good at the game, you're probably killing Vicus and Valten with just 3 engravings. That's essentially all you need. However, keeping that in mind, we have to acknowledge the fact that Berserker's technique is very cheap right now. It is a very cheap build and it's very affordable. So perhaps not having 5 engravings right now means you're missing out, because it's so cheap. Later it's probably gonna get more expensive the more people realize what's good and what's not, because everyone currently is pushing this build aside, saying who the hell even plays this. and the more people are realizing how good Berserker's technique is in the current tier of content, you know, prices are gonna go up. You know, books are already up 1,000 gold the last time I bought them. I bought them at 200 gold a pop. Now they're 1,200. So, you know, how the turntables. But without further ado, let's talk some differences. So if you're someone who is playing the Minion Fang or wants to play the Minion Fang, if you want to, there's a build guide on my channel. But if you're playing the Minion Fang and you want to replace some of these engravings, Awakening is unfortunately the only engraving that you cannot replace here. Always consider Awakening on level 3. And why? Because you get 50% cooldown here, 20% on tier on 2-piece, which puts your Awakening at 1.5 minutes, which means it will always be up when you leave burst mode. So you use it again to get back into burst mode faster. That is why it's important, and obviously more uses of your Awakening means more buff up time. It is very important, irreplaceable, and obviously the class engraving will always take a role here, so we're only gonna talk about replacing Raid Captain, Grudge, and Spirit Absorption. So what can you replace Grudge with? Grudge can be replaced by Ambush Master. Ambush Master is the next best thing to Grudge. However, Ambush Master will change your entire playstyle. It will change the way you approach Berserker's technique as a whole. You know, you walk up to a boss and you can't just use an ability unless you're on its back. And you know, as a Berserker, you have to... It's not really exactly the most sticky back attack class. So you have to always consider the fact that you always have to attack from the back. Meaning this engraving in my book is already way worse than Grudge, because I really don't like to do back attacks if I am forced to. So the other engraving that can replace Grudge is Keen Blunt Weapon. You don't have to run Grudge, you can run Keen Blunt Weapon, you can run Cursed Doll, you can even run Increased Mass. However, obviously Grudge is still the best engraving out of all of those that I've listed. It obviously has the biggest downside, but it's obviously the best. Keen Blunt, you know, Cursed Doll, Increased Mass, all of those engravings can replace Raid Captain and Spirit Absorption. If you just want more damage and you don't trust my judgment when I say that you want more attack speed rather than, you know, having more damage, then sure, go Keen Blunt, go Cursed Doll, go Increased Mass. You know, some people run Precise Dagger actually for some reason. They run a crit swiftness necklace, they get more swiftness, and they have essentially 0 crit, which, you know, this essentially takes care of, but you deal less crit damage. I wouldn't do that, you know, that's just, it's not something I would do. Adrenaline, someone asked me, is this a viable engraving for Berserker? Even with, you know, having the engravings that you have and just running this as level 1, I still wouldn't run it, because Berserker isn't a class that can keep up Adrenaline smoothly. Any class that runs Adrenaline doesn't actually have to pay attention to Adrenaline. If they play their class properly, Adrenaline is just essentially a passive buff that they have. But as a Berserker, you have to like look at your buff bar and try and keep up, you know, your Adrenaline, which can sometimes lead to deaths in a fight, because your eyes are at the bottom of your screen when they should be, you know, at the center looking at what the boss is doing. So in that case, Adrenaline is just a dead engraving for me. I would never run this even at level 1. I would probably just run Cursed Doll on level 1 if I ever hit a 9/7 stone, but you know, that's besides the point. And then the last engraving that I want to touch on is Supercharge. Supercharge, I've put it here just to mention it quick. Some people have been asking me about Supercharge. Supercharge is not a viable engraving in this build at all. Like, Supercharge is a build on its own. It is a completely different set. It is a completely different engraving, and it is a completely different playstyle. In this build, you use Awakening to get back into burst mode, and you use it to get the buff. In that build, you use Awakening purely for damage while inside burst mode. You use the other Awakening, which essentially fills up the burst bar by nothing, and it deals more damage, but you know, you want to use it in burst to get the crit and crit damage, and that's that. It uses, you know, Power Break instead of Windblade. It's a completely different build. So that's it. That's Supercharge. Don't use Supercharge in this build unless you want to play another build with Supercharge. That's it. That's all the engravings. You can run essentially any engravings here. You don't have to run 5. You can run any combination, you know, of what I just spoke of. It really doesn't matter. Don't take everything that I say too seriously, even though I think this is the best setup. If you want to run something else, you can run so. Content is very easy. Don't think that not running the most optimal setup will set you behind too much. It's just take everything easy. It's not hard, you know. That's it. That's the video. I hope I answered all the questions that people have been asking me, and I hope, you know, probably more questions are gonna rise with this video, but it is what it is. That's how life goes. Thanks for watching. I stream on Twitch if you're interested and have more questions. I would rather be asked questions on Twitch because I can answer them more with a clearer mind there. And that's it. Video over. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.